What's going on, everybody? Justin here, and in this video I want to go over the best fantasy books that I read in 2019. I'm not sure if any of them even came out in 2019. Actually, I'm pretty sure, mostly considering ones from like the 50s. Actually, one was 2018, another one that's like pretty old, from like maybe 90s, and then a couple years ago, and actually one of them did come out actually in 2019 Allied. So yeah, let's just get right into it. I got 6 books here. I'm not really going to rate them like, 1/6 or 1 or anything like that, but they were definitely the best ones that I felt that I read in 2019. They might be new to you. A lot of them probably won't be if you're like already like a fantasy lover and stuff. But I'm fairly new to the fantasy genre. I remember 2 years ago, Conan was the only that was the only tome on my kind of like my fantasy area. I didn't have a fantasy area. That was like literally it for fantasy. So yeah, definitely something I've kind of expanded into the past 2 or 3 years, and I'm just really excited to keep going with it. And hopefully this year I can actually like finish up some series. But let's just get right into it. All right, the first one we're gonna be talking about is Glenn Cook's Chronicles of the Black Company. I read 3 of them, books 3 through 5 this year, and for my favorite out of those 3, even though I think I gave them all either 4.5 or 5 stars, I'm going with the third book, which was The White Rose. I just thought the setting of The White Rose was just super interesting. Basically, without giving away too much, the Bat Company has to kind of depart from the Juniper, obviously from the events of book 2, and they are relocated to the Plane of Fear, which is this like weird pseudo mystical, just bleak landscape that's like kind of a desert, but you have like this giant like god tree thing, which is pretty epic. And then you got talking menhirs, literally just talking, like, standing stones that can like move around and stuff, and will like kind of have like really vague like Oracle of Delphi predictions and stuff, where you kind of don't have any idea really what it's meaning and stuff. Plus, we got some introduction of a few new characters and a pet, which might be more than it seems. But the pet's name is Toad Killer Dog. just and the thing is, that fits. It fits the book like so well. It's not even like jarring when you hear it. It's just Toad Killer Dog, and you're just like, yeah, that works. But anyways, Croker's like bleak, kind of dry wit shines throughout the whole book. And like I said, I gave books 4 and 5 really good ratings as well. Those ones are beginning of the books of the South, kind of in more like jungle territory and stuff. But I just thought the Plane of Fear, I don't know, it was just super cool. And obviously, it's kind of the culmination of it's like kind of the ending, arc, or the ending of the arc of the first 3 books. Kind of the plot structure and stuff. So we have kind of like, the departure of certain characters and stuff at the end of this one, but also kind of the, maybe not introduction per se, but the kind of I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, maybe reintroduction, I guess, in a new light of certain characters as well. But highly recommend Chronicles of the Black Company by Glenn Cook, especially if you like kind of that grim, dark, kind of dark fantasy vibes going on. Alright, the next one I'm going with is The Guns of Empire by Django Wexler. This is the 4th book in the Shadow Campaigns series. It's a 5-part novel series. This is the 4th book in the series, and it's got a really cool cover, as you can see, with like Winter Glass on the cover. Definitely, this was I think was the highest rated out of books 3, 4, and 5. I think 3, 4, and 5 were really, or no, 3 and 4 really, excuse me, 3 and 4 were really good. Book 1 was really good. 2 was kind of a little bit of a, kind of a dip. And book 5, sad to say, was not like quite the epic culmination I was kind of hoping it was, to be honest. But book 4 was really cool. You can definitely tell it's heavily inspired by Napoleon's Grand Armée, the Sixth Army marching into Russia, and kind of the disastrous consequences Napoleon kind of ran into during that real life campaign. If you guys don't know, the Shadow Campaigns is like preeminent like flintlock fantasy, which is probably my favorite subgenre of fantasy if I had to pick one. And we follow the story of Winter Glass through most of the series, as well as Marcus Dubois, and the Queen Ricinia. I almost forgot her name for a little bit. But anyways, Winter Glass is a female who is disguised as a male to fight in the army and stuff. And we also have a lot of like demon possession type stuff as sort of the magical elements throughout the series, but they're not super overpowered. I mean, they get pretty, it gets pretty ramped up by books like 4 and 5, but throughout the whole series, it's not like in your face like all the time beating you over the head, which was something I kind of actually enjoyed. But yeah, if you kind of like historical fantasy or Philip fantasy, you'll definitely enjoy this series. And like I said, Guns of Empire definitely heavily inspired by kind of the failed Grand Armée's conquest of Russia. You definitely get kind of like those vibes going on for that. Just found it really interesting. Love the character development and stuff. And yeah, Guns of Empire on my top fantasy list. All right. Now let's go on to another one of my favorites. I've fallen down the Warhammer like rabbit hole, particularly the Horus Heresy. If you've been following my channel in the past year, you've probably picked up on that by now. I think I read about a dozen books and kind of like the Horus Heresy, Warhammer universe. If you guys don't know, Horus Heresy is essentially like Warhammer 30k as opposed to Warhammer 40k. It's kind of like this giant prequel to the 40k lore and everything. And this is when Horus the War Master basically turns half of the Space Marine legions. They become heretical or whatever and fight, the other half of the legions to try to take over, the throne of Terra and whatever. But like I said, it's a prequel, but it's a 54 book series that has been finished now. But also this prequel of 54 books also has an ending story arc of a separate 8 books. Plus there's always like a ton of short stories. Plus each Primarch, or kind of like the general commander of each of the 18 remaining legions, also has like a short novel like associated kind of like in the Horus Heresy era and stuff. So we got quite a lot going on for that stuff. Like I said, I think I finished about 12 books. But my favorite out of all of them, probably, I'm going with the very first book in the Siege of Terra, which was The Solar War by John French. And this is the first book in kind of the ending 8-book series known as the Siege of Terra, which kind of is the end of, the Horus Heresy prequel sequence kind of thing going on. I don't know. This one just had really good, I don't even know it had actually pretty good character development, kind of, especially with Sigismund. If you guys follow Warhammer, you'll know he's like one of the captains of Dorne's Imperial Fist Legion. But definitely his kind of, I wouldn't say necessarily like a story arc, but he kind of like all his like flashbacks and stuff work really well with the story. The Solar War is all about sort of the collapsing solar defenses left for Terra. Horus has invaded the solar system, and we just see sort of the collapse of each of the kind of defense rings around, like, Pluto and Neptune and bloody blah, all the way down to the moon itself, and even Doran's super like Death Star battleship, the Phalanx. We got lots of chaos elements, definitely from the warp kind of spawning in and everything. Kind of making their some cards are finally being played that have been, hinted at, all the way through like kind of the Horus Heresy and stuff. And like I said, some of the story arcs, even all the way back to the first opening 3 books, the opening 3-book trilogy with Horus Rising and Galaxy in Flames and stuff. Like some of these story arcs with some of the remembrancers and stuff make kind of their whole like story, the whole like meaning of their like story insertion into the books and stuff is like culminated there. You see kind of like what's kind of going on and stuff. It's a really big things definitely happen, like really big plot structures and stuff are able to occur because of things that happened in the first handful of books and stuff, which is really neat to see how it's sort of all planned over the past like 15 years and everything. But like I said, lots of cool action. It's a kind of a guilty pleasure read of mine at this point, like all these Warhammer books, but it's pretty much the only sci-fi-ish stuff that I read, but I still count it pretty much as fantasy, because even though it's kind of in the future, half the time they're fighting with, chain blades and, axes and melee combat and stuff, plus all it is like the lowest sci-fi ever. Like it is essentially magic. And there is like magic as well that they even like pretty much admit, yeah, it's magic. It's not even like technology and stuff. So like I said, I've just been really enjoying the Horus Heresy series, and my favorite one of 2019, which did come out this year, was the first book in the Siege of Terra, which was the Solar War. So, could you guys kind of check that out if you know, space marines and stuff sound cool to you? Like I said, at first I was like super skeptical because I kind of hate. I don't really hate sci-fi, but I've never really been into it. But I definitely enjoyed like one that I randomly picked up in, I believe it was February of 2019. I picked up a Garo for like $3 or $4 at this like thrift store, and I was like, I'll just pick it up and be like, whatever. And it turned out really good, so that's why I kind of went down that rabbit hole. All right, next up, let's see, we'll go with Paul Anderson's The Broken Sword, which is a really cool vintage fantasy book. My friend Tim, if you've watched the channel before, you've probably seen Tim. Hopefully me and him will get some vlogs going together on a road trip tomorrow morning. See if we can put up some content there. But anyways, The Broken Sword, I believe, was written in the 50s by Paul Anderson, which is, like I said, classic fantasy writer. I believe he also wrote some of the later Conan stories and stuff. But anyways, this one was just a really cool mix of Norse mythology plus like Anglo-Saxon and Celtic Irish mythology and stuff with like a fantasy setting and everything. The main gist of the story is there is a human named Skaflock. He's kidnapped basically by the elves to help them fight the trolls and stuff. It's kind of a little complicated, like why he has to be kidnapped and everything, but eventually he's kind of like, a human elf kind of hybrid type thing kind of going on. And Skaflock has his sort of twin brother that was raised by the humans, whereas he was raised by the elves. With the kind of like, the parent swap thing kind of going on. Valgard, and it's kind of like their their kind of like rivalry, as they like kind of are the champions of different factions fighting for like the realm of like mortals and stuff, while they're like the real world is kind of going on while they're kind of doing all the other stuff on like kind of like the magical plane and stuff. But a lot of like Celtic things are like show up, which is like really interesting, like the Side and some of the Celtic gods show up, and then like a lot of the Norse gods are like major players as well. Like Odin has a major role to play. So I don't know, it's just really interesting seeing kind of this like mishmash of folklore and like different cultures and stuff, like kind of all around like the North Sea, I guess, kind of coming together. Plus it's written in kind of like that kind of vintagey, what's the word, I don't know, like epic poem type style maybe, where it's a little bit purposefully flowery and stuff. But also one of the reasons I like it as well, even though it was written in the 50s, it's got some really dark overtones. Probably the closest thing I can think of kind of a relationship to it would be like The Children of Húrin, which is like one of the later works of Tolkien that's been like kind of republished and edited by Christopher Tolkien. But it's got that really dark kind of like legit like Oedipus Greek tragedy stuff going on, but it's also like kind of written in that old time kind of epic prose and stuff. But yeah, I definitely encourage you guys to check it out if you enjoy like older fantasy and stuff. Definitely give this one a look. It's like, it kind of looks like it does not read like a pulp fantasy book, even though it's definitely like a pulp. This one's physically like a pulp fantasy book. It does not read that way, and I highly encourage you guys to check it out for something a little bit different, if you don't mind like kind of like that darker kind of crazy stuff. And especially if you like kind of the, like I said, the kind of mythological elements with like the Celtic pantheon and kind of the Norse pantheon kind of coming together like over, everything kind of around the North Sea and like England and stuff. It's pretty cool. So yeah, Paul Anderson's The Broken Sword. It's definitely a neat little read. Glad I picked it up after Tim's recommendation. Alright, so now let's go on to definitely one of my favorites. I finished 4 books in T.H. White's Once and Future King cycle, which is like a retelling of the Arthurian legend. The only one I haven't read is the Book of Merlin, which is like a 5th book that was kind of posthumously read. And for what written, excuse me. And for what I can understand, it's related to these books, but not really directly like a 5th book in a series, I guess. But yeah, the very first book in this one, The Sword in the Stone, there is definitely a reason why when it came out, like Disney like made an adaptation, the movie adaptation for it. I don't know, just T.H. White's blend of kind of putting in a kind of modern, kind of witty humor into this sort of medieval, fantasy realm. I mean, it's England, obviously, England or whatever, but the way he kind of combines kind of like modern like thinking to like that era, then plus like the whimsy and the like sobriety like all together in the same chapter is just, I don't know, I think it just works really well, and it's incredibly well written. I definitely encourage you guys to check this out, especially if you enjoy anything Arthurian. This is like one of the ones you have to like start reading like immediately, for sure. But even if you just like any kind of like classic fantasy, definitely pick up and at least try The Sword and Stone. Like I said, the first book is sort of the telling of Arthur's childhood and kind of his growing up under kind of the tutelage of Merlin. And a big facet that I really enjoyed too, just like kind of like in the movie, is his a lot of his lessons and learning take place as he's transformed into animals and kind of has to like live in their shoes and stuff, and kind of learn more about like different things, especially like when he becomes the I can't remember if he becomes a Merlin himself when he has to like talk to the Goshawk and stuff. But anyways, I really enjoyed The Sword and Stone. Like I said, I did finish this series, so that's how good it was, considering I've only finished, I think, 5 or 6 fantasy series in like 2 or 3 years. And another highlight definitely would have been the third book, which is The Ill-Made Knight, which is sort of the whole story arc of Lancelot and kind of, his beginning of his fall from grace with his, affair with Guinevere and everything. And the kind of the arc of Arthur throughout the 4 books also is really well done. Obviously, as a child, and he's kind of growing up and learning, and then as he conceives of the Knights of the Round Table, and how his main goal basically is to eliminate the whole concept of might is right. If you're just stronger or better, or if your kingdom is stronger or better, at martially, you're somehow morally and just right, even though that doesn't really make any sense. And this kind of goes against that. And then also his sort of understanding of Lancelot and Guinevere is just, I don't know, like I said, it's just very touching, and I don't know, just really good. Encourage you guys to read it. Yeah, just read it for yourself. Alright, and lastly, for probably my favorite grimdark book of the year, which is probably like one of my other favorite-ish subgenres of fantasy, is Ravencry by Ed McDonald. This is the second book in the Ravensmark trilogy. I also read Blackwing as well, early 2019, I believe. And in this one, this trilogy, we follow Rialt Galahero, which already that's a pretty epic name for a fantasy character and stuff. And sort of we follow his journey, but we're starting here when he's middle age, 40s or so, maybe early 50s, and he's basically kind of at this point kind of a washed up, not technically a mercenary, but for his, I don't want to go into it too much, but anyways, he's, like I said, he's middle aged. He just doesn't want to deal with all this stuff anymore. He's definitely a broken man, and he's kind of pulling the whole book, or both books. He's kind of trying to pull himself together, and do the right thing, and just kind of find some kind of meaning to why he's doing. But it reads so well because he's just like everyone else. Every time it's why am I really doing this? I don't know. It's kind of the right thing to do, but why is it really the right thing to do? What I kind of like about this one too is, even though it's grimdark, it's not super nihilistic like a lot of grimdark. It's basically there's no morality at all. We're just gonna go burn every village and kill everyone and stuff, which gets kind of old sometimes, I think. But the setting of this one is also really cool. We have what is the city called? Valengrad. I was about to say Valgard, just the character's name. Valgard and Valengrad are pretty close, I guess. But anyways, it's kind of a cool steampunk-ish fantasy setting, because you do have some flintlock fantasy kind of elements with firearms and stuff. But kind of the magic system it has a very it's called flossing and stuff. I know it sounds kind of weird now that I'm saying it or whatever, but it has a lot of kind of electricity kind of undertones to it. But yeah, like I said, Real Garahero, is basically bound to this like really old wizard dude named Crowfoot, who has, and you don't really know what Crowfoot and the other kind of like super wizards kind of up to, except they're fighting these other like demigod things that are like across this thing called the Misery, which is just like this like radioactive desert type thing. But anyways, like I said, just really good grimdark. For grimdark, it's kind of a little bit different spin on it. But like I said, even though it's not super nihilistic, anytime like I'm reading this book, I always like picture like the dreariest like environment ever. Like it's always got like that tiny little bit of drizzle, even though like it'll say it's not. It probably would say it's not raining, but just the way the author does such a good job describing kind of the bleakness of kind of Galharrow's life, and like what he's doing, and kind of the city he's in, and wherever he is, it's always like I always just envision it kind of just barely drizzling some rain, just to make everything just that tad bit more kind of just miserable, even if it doesn't really affect anything. But that was probably like the worst like way I could the worst like way of like recommending a book. But anyways, that was definitely one of my favorite grimdark fantasy books of the year. Hopefully I didn't butcher that like as bad as I feel like I just did, but I'm too lazy to go do it again, so we're sticking with it. So there you guys have it. Those are the six, I think six, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, six fantasy books that I read in 2019. Definitely didn't read as many in 2019 as I did in 2018, but my reading was definitely a lot more varied for sure. Even though fantasy, I think, is like only like my second or third most read genre now. Actually, in 2019, it might have been like nature and like my environmental books might have like overtaken it, just like in sheer like volume. But anyways, my goal kind of with this year is definitely getting a few more actual series just so I can knock it out of the park, and so I can start new ones. But I'll probably just start new ones anyways. But anyways, leave some comments down below about what your favorite fantasy books were in 2019. Just tell me like what you've been kind of like, what subgenres you've been like really getting into lately, or the authors, or whatever, whatever have you. Yeah, that would have made a lot of sense right there. Tell me what you think about any of these. If you've read any of these, I'd like to talk to you guys about these things. Just basically gush about them, I guess, a little bit more. But yeah, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Check out my Twitter and Instagram and Etsy, and what's the other one? Oh, my website. Duh. Yeah. Just check out all of the things, that make my life happier. And then yeah, just whatever you end up reading 2019, whether you read some good fantasy or if they suck, just try to read victoriously.